Welcome to the Real Estate Rebel. I am your host, Scott McGillivray. Today, we've got a really great topic that I'm super excited to talk about because I have so much to say. And if it wasn't enough that I have so much to say, I also have a very well-versed guest on this topic as well. We're going to be talking about how vacation rental properties can fast-track your retirement. We're really going to talk all about vacation rentals, cottages, the things that I absolutely love because I grew up with a cottage. I love going to the cottage. I do shows about cottages. I have cottage rental properties. And I just bought a new personal cottage as well. So this is all kind of fun. Joining me today is Michelle Kelly. She is the editor of Cottage Life magazine and host of the Cottage Life podcast. If you love cottages and recreational properties as much as I do, you should check out her podcast. It is awesome. I'm excited about this because obviously I love and do a lot of cottage associated activities, but I also love the investing opportunity. So that's the angle that I'm going to be talking to Michelle about today as well. It's like, what does it really take to be able to use your cottage as something that you can benefit from personally, but also financially, because these places can cost a lot of money. There's a lot going on there. Now, at the end of the podcast, I want to get into some absolutely ballistic statistics that I read recently about cottage country and vacation properties in general. Since the pandemic, things have gone crazy in real estate in so many different ways. And I'm going to give you the real statistics as to where things are right now, what type of price increases, demand increases on the overall volume of this, and sort of what the long-term plan is as well. So in order to go over all of the things we need to know, we're going to cover 5 big topics about real estate and real estate investing. We're going to talk whether it's a good idea to get into it, what are the real costs of owning a vacation property, because I do shows about this, and a lot of people will comment later like, you didn't talk about the cost of emptying a septic tank. I'm like, yeah, we didn't have time to fit that into the episode, but thanks, Karen, for your concern. But the benefits of renting it out, vacation properties, and what the post-pandemic situation means. And then, of course, long-term. What's the long-term investing strategy? So without further ado, I would like to invite Michelle to the podcast. Welcome, Michelle.
Hi, Scott. Nice to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. You do your own podcast, so we're going to have a lot to talk about.
Yes, exactly. We can discuss our favorite microphones.
So you're in the cottage business. Mm-hmm. And I mean, how long have you been the editor of Cottage Life magazine?
Well, I've been the editor of the magazine since 2015, but I have been working at Cottage Life since 1998, which is kind of it's unusual to be in one place for so long. It's the only place I've ever worked. In fact, I started as the receptionist as I came out of university, and then I just stayed because I liked it and I worked my way up. So now I'm the editor of the magazine, and I oversee the website and the podcast and video and all sorts of other things that we do on the brand, which is quite huge. So it's a really great brand to work on. And of course, I'm a passionate cottager, so it's really awesome to be able to talk about something I love for 22 years straight.
It's such a good brand. It brings your content brings so much joy to me, not only because it's relevant and it's well thought out, but because I grew up with it on the coffee table and, reading the articles. And so it's nostalgic to me as well. Cottaging, I don't know if it's the same for everybody, but especially for me, is that it kind of just dials everything back and keeps you, it brings you back to sort of the simple things in life that are truly meaningful.
Totally.
And I don't know, no matter what happens in the world, no matter how technology changes or how, crazy world events can impact our lives, the cottage seems to be the safe haven where everybody gets back to and always has a good time. So thank you for what you're doing. I'm glad you've been doing it for a long time. But let's talk about cottages, not only personally. Let me get right to the question.
Mm-hmm.
Are they a good investment or a bad investment?
Well, it's funny that you are asking that question right after you talked about how cottagers tend to have a really emotional connection to their cottages, because those two things are really related. My boss and longtime mentor, Al Zigovitz, who founded Cottage Life in 1988, he always says, if you're looking to invest in just to grow your money, probably don't do it in a cottage, because you could put your money somewhere else and you wouldn't have to worry about it as much as you would about a cottage. So you can invest in it. It's a good investment on a lot of levels. And of course, you're a real expert on that. But what I can confirm for sure is that there's a lot of maintenance and a lot of work and a lot of sort of unexpecteds that come up when you're investing in a seasonal property in particular, which so many cottages are. And you really have to be aware of those things going into it, and you have to account for them. So here's a prime example. It's January, you have, shut up your cottage tight at Thanksgiving weekend previous, and everything's all perfect. The water is drained, the boats are in, the windows are shuttered, and everything, you're confident that you've done everything exactly to plan, which you may well have done. And then January, the largest snowstorm in Ontario history sweeps in, and then there's ice, and suddenly there's a tree that falls on the top of your cottage. And the truth is, you can't cut down all the trees around your cottage. I mean, that would defeat the purpose of being there. So that's a perfect example of something that happens at a cottage that you actually can't even really control. I mean, to some degree you can, but there's a risk there. And that is a classic situation with cottaging. So I think if you're looking at investing in a cottage, you have to be prepared to really understand what your risks are. And for sure, all that stuff that can happen in the off season is just one of a few risks that are involved there. So I think I always say to people, yes, you can invest in a cottage property. It can be a good investment, but you have to go in with your eyes wide open, much in the same way I suspect you would with the city property, but it's different things that I think you have to be aware of.
For sure. I agree. There are different things, but there's also insurance for those types of situations.
Well, sure there is, of course. But I think it's a matter of when you're sitting in the city all winter and you're thinking to yourself, okay, so is this the snowstorm that's going to do it? And it's a 3.5-hour drive to get there. So that's the thing. Like, people may not want to have that concern in their head, so, or maybe they're willing to assume the risk. It's just being aware of the risk when you're going into it.
Absolutely. And you know what, I do have to say, and you will probably recognize this because you have such a history with vacation properties and cottages. I mean, when I was growing up and we had a cottage when I was a kid, it was very isolating being up there. I remember we used to drive up, and there was no cell phones. There was a landline, which didn't always work. You shared it with like 5 neighbors, so you never knew if someone else was on the phone.
Yeah, it had to like ring 3 times, and you knew it was for you. Yes,
and like, you went up there and you basically didn't talk to anyone. You weren't connected to. There was no internet, nothing. Like, it was just completely off the grid. So looking back, it really was a rustic experience. However, let's talk about what the last 5 to 7 years has done to connect us better to these properties. I mean, the only reason I have a landline at my cottage right now is so that the alarm system can be monitored and I can get an insurance discount. That's the only reason for me to have a wet line for the phone. But otherwise, we have full internet, satellite TV. I've got remote cameras, so I can right now go on my phone and I can see what's going on at the cottage. I can see what's going on outside. I can see if someone's at the dock. And so now we're a little more connected in that capacity. But the real game changer is some of the online platforms that allow us to rent out our properties in a way that did not exist 25 years ago. I remember my parents renting out our cottage. We came across hard times. I remember my dad lost his job. My mom wasn't working. And the question came up, like, do we sell the cottage? That's like the first question that comes up. And we were all like, no.
Yeah.
And so my mom had the wits about her to say, well, why don't we try renting it out and bringing in some income? Because we know that, a lot of people like to rent up here. And it was like putting classified ads in the newspaper. You had no way of vetting tenants. You had no way of getting pre-collected rent unless they mailed it to you or something crazy. It
Mhm.
was a grueling process, but it was something we had to do. And so we started sharing for about 6 or 7 years. Half our summer went to the renters, and then we could use it half the summer, but that was enough to keep the cottage. So, I say necessity is the mother of all invention. Me as a kid, preteen, seeing this and asking questions like, why do we rent it out? And watching my mom like put locks on closets and move the booze over
Mhm.
here and
Yeah,
leave
yeah.
gifts out. I was like taking it all in at like 10, 12 years old. And I was like, well, this is cool. I mean, if we can have a cottage for free based on renting it out, there must be something here. But it was hard work. It was like a job. It was like a
Yeah,
job.
yeah.
And now technology has changed so dramatically that you can really, the opportunity is more realistic now, I think. And it's time for cottage life to really, maybe we should talk about giving people the tools in order to do this, in order to keep those properties in the family longer, or let people achieve the dream of having a cottage even sooner.
Well, for sure, it's funny actually that you bring that up about your childhood, because in fact, my story is exactly the same, where we began renting out our cottage. And I remember calling the Globe and Mail and putting in, paying by the letter or however you did it, which seems so archaic now. And that was an avenue for us to hold on to our cottage for a little bit longer. Now, eventually we did sell that cottage. And now with my own little family, we rent the same cottage year after year. And I know that it's, no, I mean, I know it from all sides, the renting equation. But I will say, I think renting it's been a huge game changer, no question about it. Not just in terms of having a cottage as an investment, but just as an entry into the market. We began seeing probably 4 or 5 years ago, actually, hearing more and more stories anecdotally from cottagers themselves, and then from real estate agents, about people who had no intention of getting into the cottage market, but then the property market in the city went so gangbusters that they couldn't get in the city. And they have their little nest egg and they want to put it somewhere, and they think, well, maybe I'll buy a cottage. And so we were seeing this trend of young people. We called it skip the house, buy the cottage. So a lot of people would buy their cottage and continue to rent in the city. So sort of turning that model on your head, where you grow up, you get married, you have a home, you have babies, you work to achieve the cottage dream. And it's sort of, we reversed it almost. And I think what's interesting about that in terms of renting is that the only way that a lot of these people, I should say, were able to make that equation work was to say, okay, we're going to rent our cottage for X amount of weeks each year, or in some cases even, we're just going to rent it every summer, all summer for the next 5 years. And then we're going to know, okay, as we get older, we'll spend more time with an eye to retirement, and that's what we'll be when we retire. Really long-term thinkers, of which I am not one. I'm always jealous of those people. But I think the thing that's interesting about that is, as you just said, is that what really enabled that trend to a high degree are how easy it is to rent your cottage out now. You don't have to call a newspaper and pay by the word. You can go on any number of a gazillion cottage rental sites, and you can upload photos, and they can do the marketing for you, and you can vet people through their site. You can get paid through their site. It's so simple now to be a renter or to be someone who's renting out. And I think that has really impacted the market in all sorts of ways. The chief one being that you can now afford a cottage when maybe you didn't see a path to ownership, and now you do because of renting.
Yeah. And I'll tell you a couple of the things that in my experience with the show, Scott's Vacation House Rules it's in all across North America, and people are just asking me a million questions. Like, how do I do this? Is it true I can buy a place, like my dream retirement home, and rent it out until I retire?
Yeah.
And I mean, the answer is maybe, right? It's never a yes or no. Every vacation or recreational property has different costs associated with it. But one of the things that I love, because I come from traditionally like the landlord and tenant world, right?
Yeah.
I started with student rentals and then multiplexes. I am providing people with a home typically. And that has its own complications legally and contractually when you are renting somebody a primary residence. With vacation properties, you don't fall under any of the Landlord and Tenancies Act guidelines. It's a free for all. Like you can change the rent every day. Like today it's $500 a day. Tomorrow it's $800 a day. You can,
that wouldn't make you very popular with your renters, I would assume.
I'm just saying there's so much flexibility and freedom. We collect rent beforehand. Like nobody gets the codes to the doors unless they've already prepaid the rent. Like, could you imagine like that to someone who is a landlord for 15 years before getting into the vacation market? This was like a dream come true. So when you compare it to other opportunities, being able to charge instead of an annual rent, which you can only raise by 2% every year, versus this free-for-all of vacation properties where I collect all my rent almost a year in advance. I got damage deposits. I got cleaning fees that I can charge. I've got long weekends where I double the rent and I still have tons of demand. It was very refreshing to start investing in the vacation market. Now, to your point, is it easy? No. It's a lot of work.
It's far away. I mean, it's like
it's remote investing.
Exactly. If you live in Toronto and you own 15 properties in the city, you can drive to each one in half an hour at the most. It's a lot different if you live in Toronto and your property is in, Bancroft and it's 3.5 hours away. It's a different situation.
You do need to have a local property manager. That is one of the critical aspects of remote investing. I mean, I've been investing all across the US and across Canada for a while. So I'm used to having a property manager I haven't even seen a lot of the properties that I've bought. I've never even been there. I'm buying them with property managers. So I'm a little more comfortable with the idea. In fact, I prefer that somebody else is going there, is unlocking the doors or doing the turnover and cleaning it and doing repairs, rather pay the fees for that than to have to do it myself. It makes it more scalable. But I didn't want to miss the opportunity here to prepare the recreational investor or the short-term real estate investor for some of the expenses that they might not anticipate with these properties. And in your experience, what are the things that people miss or they don't realize are involved cost-wise with these properties?
Well, I think are you talking about people who are just investing and who are renting it as well?
Well, anyone who's buying a vacation property who's never had one or is planning on buying one and renting it, there's other considerations other than the tree falling.
Yeah, sure. Of course. I mean, I think you have to go to the things that, again, you're not used to maintaining as a property owner in the city. And that's where you should really be starting. So the biggest one for sure is the septic system. People are used to not having to deal with that. If you, for example, it's a Canada Day long weekend and you've decided you're going to have your cottage that weekend, and you're going to invite all your friends, you're going to have a big party, and you have one bathroom and everyone uses it for the whole weekend. And then there's this funny smell on Sunday morning and you're thinking, where's that smell coming from? And it's coming from your septic system because it's overloaded and someone puts the wrong, sorry to say it, it's gross, but someone puts the wrong thing into the septic system. And at Cottage Life, we talk about this very openly, of course, because it's a huge part of what we do. But and then you're on the hook for upward, it could be $20,000 to replace that septic system. And it's not even in your head to be thinking about that, So that's a crucial thing. If you're going to buy an investment property, you really need to know what is the septic situation, how old is it, how well has it been maintained, has it been pumped out, which itself is an expense, and making sure that you're planning for that expense. They do not last forever, so you got to know that if you're going to hold on to this for a long term, that you're going to have to replace that septic system eventually. So that's a big one. Another big one is your water source. So you want to make sure, particularly if you're renting out, that's so important, of course, because you don't want to be on the hook for people who get sick from the water that you said was okay to drink, right? I mean, that's very dire situation, obviously. If you have a well, you have to make sure it's maintained properly. You have to make sure your water is being tested every year, which you can do through your local health authority, which is, pretty simple process, but should be taken care of. If you're bringing water in from the lake, do you have a filter on it? Is the filter working effectively? Are you maintaining that to the degree that it needs to be maintained? Super important stuff. So the well and the septic are always things, the water source and the septic are always the things that people don't really have. It's not that they don't think about it so much as that they don't have experience with it. So they really have to be aware. We do tons of stories in Cottage Life about how to own and operate and troubleshoot all of these systems, because it's perennially important for our audience. And I think too, there's other things that are maybe more obvious but often overlooked. Like, I was talking with your producer about what the wear and tear on your car is. Driving 3 hours twice a week. Sometimes driving on a road that's maybe full of potholes and isn't as well maintained as you'd like it to be. That road itself is another expense that you may have to take care of with your neighbors. I'm really making cottaging seem like such a fun thing, aren't I? Yeah, again, this is stuff you really do have to think about. Another thing that people don't always consider is, boats. Boats are, I know when I first learned how much boats cost, I was pretty shocked by it. But, if you are perhaps looking for a bargain and you get onto an island property to find one, you really need a boat, and you need to have it working all the time. You need to put gas in that boat. All of that kind of stuff you have to think about before you buy, because it makes a significant difference to your bottom line.
Absolutely. And I'm going to just go right ahead, put my hand up and say I'm going to make a huge recommendation for anyone who's thinking long-term investing and personal use of a property. Stay away from the islands.
Yeah. Oh, yes. See, the islands, though, I mean, I guess I see what you're saying from an investment perspective, but it's pretty cool to be on your own island.
It's the coolest thing ever once a year.
When it's someone else's island and you're
I have a friend that has an island cottage, and I love it. I absolutely love it. And every time we go there, I have a blast and he's miserable because he's like, I got to go pick someone up at the dock, and we got to go pick up this, and we have to leave in an hour because the wind's coming. And when the wind comes, we're in trouble. And if, I was like, oh man, this is fun for me.
I know. Well, what's so funny about an island is that I think there's a lot of places in Ontario in particular that are only accessible, like if you're in a boat going to an island, like Georgian Bay, of course. Which is so perfect and spectacular, but you really can't get the benefit unless you go to an island cottage. And I think my brother, in fact, rents a island cottage every year in Georgian Bay, and he actually has his own boat, because if you're renting at your cottage, you cannot include your boats without extra insurance, and that's very difficult to get. So yes, so I think it's like, for sure, if you're looking at renting, that can be a barrier to find the right renter, because you need someone who has a boat essentially and who is comfortable, particularly again on Georgian Bay, operating it in an environment where, as you just said, the weather can be a real pain and can really be dangerous. You have to know what you're doing on big water like that.
Yeah. And you know what, as someone, I'm searching for vacation and recreational properties all the time. I've bought compounds and cottages and camps. I tried buy anything where I know I can make some value out of it. But there's a few things that I've learned along the way. And this might be a bit of a sidebar, but I'd love to hear, maybe I'm missing something. There's a few things you need to consider when buying a vacation property that you may never think of if you're only used to buying a home in the city. And one, for instance, is perspective. Are you facing northeast or are you facing southwest? Because that's a 25% price difference right there.
Oh, it's when I go to a cottage, so there's a couple of things that when I go to a cottage, I think, who owns this place? What's wrong with them? So two things are very fixable. You need to always have a map of where your lake is. Every time you decorate a cottage has to include a map.
Yes.
You always have to have lots of hooks in the bedrooms. I go to cottages, I'm like, why do these people not have hooks in the bedrooms? Anyway, those are two very small incidental things that are obviously easily changed. But what cannot be changed is whether or not you can see the sunset. And the truth is, I am a person who wants to see the sunset. And if I go to a cottage and I can't see it, if I'm sitting on the dock and the sun is gone at 3:00 in the afternoon, never to return, why would you do that to yourself? Now, perhaps because it is less expensive. So it's a stepping stone to something else. I get it. I totally get it. And, if you don't get the sunset, you get the moonrise, which can be also very spectacular. But yeah, your face is saying it all. It's not the sun. The moonrise is not the sunset to me either. So, and, that's the oldest real estate adage in the book, isn't it? Location, location, location. Of course, that's true. But at a cottage, it's different. Maybe it's not true. I don't know. But at a cottage, it's different. Because it's not just where you are, what lake you're on, what town you're near, it's where you face 100%. The view can never change. That is one thing that you can never, if it has a falling down old cabin on it, cool, you can change that, no problem. You cannot change what you see out onto the lake. And that's why you're going to the cottage in the first place. So make that be very important. Yes.
When we as a family, I say we as a family, which was like 99% me just telling my whole family, we need a cottage. But when I was looking for a personal property, I had like a top 10 things, right? And I remember saying to my wife, I'm like, we're never going to get all of these 10 things, but these are the things we need to think of when we're looking at a cottage. Do you think you could guess what any of those 10 criteria would be?
So I was just going to say, Scott, what are those 10 things? I'm dying to know. Well,
this is like an article,
personal, right? Like it's pretty, everyone has, I don't know how you come at it. Like some people have their things because that was the way their cottage was when they were little, but some people, maybe you're one of them, are probably thinking more with their head than their heart because they see a bigger picture or a different picture. But okay, I'll try and take a guess, but you're really putting me on the spot. So the view, I'm going to guess.
Yep.
I'm going to guess that you wanted road access.
That's another one.
I'm going to guess that you wanted good swimmable water.
Clean water, yes.
Yes. Okay. A dock that you could dive off of?
Oh, well, a dock that I can jump off of, yes.
Yeah, yes. Okay. A lot of people say that. I don't know. You seem like very young and healthy, but I don't know. A lot of people want to make sure they're close to amenities, like a hospital, for example, like that they don't have to drive a long time if someone, breaks their leg water skiing or something.
That's a good one. That wasn't on my list, but that is a good one.
A lot of people, especially people who are looking to retire, right? Who are looking to age in cottage country. That's really important.
Yeah.
A lot of people want privacy. That's for sure one of your things, right?
Yep.
Yep. So making sure that, and a good tip on privacy, if you allow me to sidebar about it for a second, is
go.
If you're buying in the summer or in the spring and all the leaves are on the trees, you got to be really careful because in the winter and in the fall and in the early spring, there are no leaves on the trees. And if privacy is a big deal to you, make sure you know what it looks like in the seasons where there's no foliage because it really changes things. Your neighbor's a lot closer when there's no leaves on the tree and you can see them. So we always say to people, and the same thing goes with your shoreline too, actually, because a lot of people, they'll buy at a time where they're not going in the lake and then they get there, they're all excited, it's the first visit, and they put their feet in the water and it's like mucky and weedy and gross. So those are two things you cannot overlook with a cottage. But back to your list, what have I missed?
You missed a couple obvious ones, but I'll give you my list.
Are they about the building?
It's a little bit about everything, but here's my top 10 things that I was taking into consideration when looking for the perfect cottage.
Okay.
Number one, it had to be 2 hours or less driving from my house. Okay.
I can't believe I missed that one. That's a very
can't believe you missed that one. Mm-hmm. And the other obvious one is I had a certain price point that I didn't want to go beyond because I didn't want to have a big mortgage or something that was a burden. I want this place to be my freedom place, right? Right. So that's my 2. Road access was 3. Like you have to be able to drive there. And you have to be able to drive there all year round. I don't want one of those, summer maintenance only type things. I need to be able to dive or jump off the dock. So deep water, at least at the end of the dock. Here's the one where it gets tricky. I also want shallow entry.
Yes. You need a long dock is what you need.
You need a long dock. Like I'm okay with a 50-foot, 60-foot dock. That's what I have. I have a 60-foot dock. And when I say shallow entry, I'm kind of like clean, weed-free, not too rocky, right? I want to be able to boat to town or to some destination, right? Like it's nice to get on your boat and go for ice cream.
Yes.
With the kids. Yes. That's something. And also when we have friends up or even if my wife's up with her friends, it's nice for them to be able to go and boat into town and go for lunch or do something fun. It doesn't have to be fancy. It just has to be an adventure.
Yes. Right? I get you.
I wanted the ability to build a second structure. So for me, I wanted to have the ideal scenario is you've got your main cottage, which cottages are all about bedrooms, right? So you have 4, maybe 5 bedrooms, and some of those are usually downstairs. I love the walkout basement thing, but that wasn't a deal breaker. But I wanted to build like a 2-car detached garage with like a 1-bedroom bunkie above it. just so that when you have another family there, you can kind of accommodate different groups of people. Because to me, the cottage is all about going up with your friends.
Yes. You know what? Also, sorry, just to say about that, that's a great idea. And that's also really good for retirement, because you have kids, those kids grow up and they have kids, and those kids are loud in the morning. You want them out of the house. And that's the truth. That's the truth. Go ahead.
And the last one that I had, well, I got two more. I guess one is I wanted I didn't want to be too high off the lake. I didn't want a ton of steps.
Yeah.
My goal was 30 feet or less off the water, because going out and having 1 million steps down, I mean, the view is great, but you get down to the dock and you're like, oh my gosh, I forgot to bring a beer. It's like, are you kidding me? You want to be fairly flat down to the water is ideal. And the last thing is I wanted a boathouse.
Yeah.
That was a bit of a personal one, but the boathouse. And so I bought a property for our family recently, and it had about 7 of these. I was able to modify to get like 1 or 2 more of them. So I feel like I did pretty good. You're never going to get them all.
No.
But
I feel like of those ones, like you can build a bunkie.
You can build a bunkie.
You can build a bunkie. You can often, not always, but you can often build a boathouse. I think like you could even get better road access if you really wanted to put the money into it. That's actually fairly achievable. But I agree with the thing you said about 2 hours or less. Like I think, people, you might imagine I get the question all the time, how do I get a bargain? And that's the one thing that will drive your price up, right? Is the 2 hours or less. If you're particularly close to Toronto, where there's the most people, it's expensive. 2 hours inside a 2-hour commute is a lot more money. Like you can get a lot more value if you go east, but you're going to drive further.
Yeah, I mean, if you're willing to go 3 hours, all of a sudden prices just plummet,
huge,
right?
Big difference. Huge
big difference.
Yes,
but
sure.
Big water was kind of key as well. I love the boating. Like I'm a boating person. If I get in a boat and I get to the other side of the lake in 3 minutes and then I come back, I'm like, now what do I do?
Yeah. I get you. Well, I mean, that's why I've always loved Georgia Bay too. It's just, you almost feel like you're on, where I go in the summer is Lake Huron, and it looks like the ocean. You could boat forever there, which is really nice.
It's good. Something else I didn't put on here, but that was kind of top of my mind, was just like make sure that there's the ability to do some good fishing, because I love fishing.
Right? Fishing. Huh.
You don't want one of those lakes where there's just no fish. That's not fun.
Yes. Well, I think there's more and more lakes where there's no, I think it's harder to catch fish than there used to be. We did a big story on that.
It's harder. But that's my Scott McGillivray top 10 things you should think about before buying your vacation property. Boom.
Yeah, no, that's a good list. I'm slightly embarrassed that I didn't think about some of those things, because those things that you're talking about are the things that I hear all the time, and I think, you're so experienced in terms of buying property, but again, I think most people aren't certainly to the degree that you are, but most cottage buyers are buying for the first time, and these are exactly the kinds of things that are not top of mind for them, and I think it's good that steps down to the lake, again, a very good one for retirement. Like if you're going to retire there, you don't want to go 150 steps from your cottage to your dock.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I agree with you though. Once I do find that property, the first thing I do is inspect the septic and well. Yeah. That's the first thing I do. Water test and septic inspection to make sure that it's got the capacity for everything that's there, plus anything that I want to add, right?
Yes.
That's critical.
Yeah.
Wow, I could do this conversation for a long time, but I want to get to the kind of last 2 points, and we can kind of crush them in one session, I think, which is vacation properties and the pandemic. How has that impacted things, and what does the future of cottage country look like based on all the things that are going on in the real estate world and kind of the global situation? Yeah,
well, I mean, if I only could say how it will all turn out, right? The pandemic has in my observation, again, this is just my observation, it's accelerated existing trends in a lot of ways. And I think when we talked at the beginning of this conversation about how more young people, or just more people in general, are skipping the house and buying the cottage, or turning the whole cottage is something I'll buy eventually scheme on its head and buying cottages now. I think the pandemic has accelerated that because living downtown in a city when you have to maintain physical distance from people and all of the things about living downtown in a city, like all the great culture and street life, are pretty much gone at the moment or fading. I think the idea of having a place in the woods all to yourself, isolated, where you can have your family or where you can just find some peace and quiet is actually more attractive than it's ever been. And I do think that people are looking at, the long-term ability to work from home. So the putting your money into a cottage, it really is more your year-round home because you're going to spend more of your time there, even if you're working full-time, quote unquote, in the city. So I think that all of the trends, like the pandemic, working from home, the desire to have your own space, all of that is really making cottages seem more attractive. So and again, it's only been 6 months. Things changed very quickly. I've heard from many people over the course of the summer who how do I find a cottage? I can't find one. We get messages on our Instagram, how do I get a cottage? And the truth is there aren't as many as there used to be. Supply is way, way down. Real estate agents in cottage country are having a great summer. And I don't anticipate that changing, truthfully, because I think while it's more expensive to buy a cottage in a lot of cases than it used to be, it's also more expensive or less expensive or more practical to carry one because of the renting situation that we talked about. And I think that's the other part of the pandemic that's really changing the cottage market, which is how many people are renting cottages. How, you can't go away, you can't take a vacation. I know my own family, we often would go road tripping for a week or two down into Maine or through New York, and we're not doing that anymore. We took an extra week at the cottage this summer. So I think that, people then they get into the lifestyle of renting a cottage and they think, hey, this is pretty great. And they continue to do it because it is great. I mean, I've made my whole living is staked out on how wonderful going to the cottage is. And I'm not wrong. It really is. So I think, when you ask me what the pandemic will do, I think it will just accelerate a lot of those trends, honestly. Now, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen in 6 months? It might be that next summer, if we are able to, everyone's like, forget it, I'm traveling because I never know when the next pandemic's going to come. Who actually knows? But I'm curious to know what you think will happen with the market.
Well, we're doing more shows about vacation properties, obviously, and I think that this trend of people understanding the tools that are available in order to purchase a property and rent it out makes it more achievable for folks. And I think one of the things I wrote down that you said was, I loved this line. It was skip the city, buy the cottage, right? Skip the house, buy the cottage.
Yeah.
We're already starting to see that trend where people are buying a vacation property and then they're renting a place in the city instead. So it's really interesting to me. I'm following it very closely. I have to say that I'm happy I started buying vacation properties and cottages before the pandemic hit because prices are up, demand is up. The real pressure is that there's only so much lakefront and it's limited as to how much lakefront you can get close to the city. And the other thing is that people who, 10, 20 years ago, if people weren't using the cottage, it got sold.
Yeah.
Now, if people aren't using the cottage, it gets rented. So the inventory isn't there. The trusted realtors that I work with in the vacation markets, they're complaining. They're like, nobody's selling anything. I got lots of buyers. I got nobody selling. The inventory isn't there. So I think with interest rates low, with the new normal of being able to work from anywhere, it just makes, and on top of that, the opportunity to rent these properties, it's like the trifecta of money being put towards these short-term vacation rentals. So I think we're still at the beginning of what could be a huge drive on the value of vacation properties. And we'll just, we'll have to see what happens. But right now, the trend looks like it's going to continue to go upwards.
Well, yeah. And I mean, I think the thing that you just said that's so important, like whatever happens with the pandemic, the work from home shift of work culture is here to stay. Like, I think that no matter what, more companies will be letting their employees work more often from their homes. And so the home is going to be wherever they want it to be. So I think that no matter what happens with COVID-19, that's going to impact the market in a big way for a long time.
You got it. Well, sounds, Michelle, like we have a lot more to talk about.
Can I just mention one thing that Cottage Life is working on that I wanted to make sure everyone knew about, because it's really great, particularly if you're looking for real estate. Each year we have the Cottage Life show in the fall and the spring, and a massive consumer show in Mississauga. And obviously this year we're not having it because of COVID-19, but we're having it virtually. We're really excited, November 20th to 22nd.
Okay.
So people can come and talk to experts and like all the stuff that we've been talking about. And they can talk to me, talk to exhibitors, go shopping, do all the fun cottage stuff, but do it all online. So cottagelife.com is the place to go to find out all about that.
I am complete supporter. Go to cottagelife.com. It is the best resource when it comes to cottage country. I've been a fan. I've been reading them since they've been on my coffee table when I was a kid up at the cottage. I think we still have huge stacks of them. I mean, I'm looking at the one of everyone jumping off the dock over your shoulder there. I can't even look at that without smiling, because that is
that's in fact my mother, because we had to shoot this in COVID, so we had to keep our bubble really small. So it's my mom, bless her, because she's 73 years old on the cover of a magazine in her bathing suit. I'm so proud of her. She's such a goer. But yes, so
moms are the best.
So, thank you so much, Scott. It was so nice to meet you.
Thanks, Michelle. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, cheers. Bye.
Take care. Amazing. That was awesome. Cottagelife.com if you want more information about cottages from Michelle and the team over there. Gosh, I love talking about cottages, and it's been such a nice addition to my real estate investing portfolio. I think we will revisit it again for sure. And I want to divulge to you guys the answer to something I mentioned at the beginning. We were talking about how the pandemic has affected cottage country. And we know that there's been, in the current real estate climate, there's been a huge impact on vacation properties. But I'm going to give you the statistics on it. Check this out. So here's a report from CREA and the Lakelands Association of Realtors, which covers a big part of cottage country. On a year-to-date basis, waterfront sales have increased by 36.9%. That is massive. Here's the next stat that I liked. The median price for waterfront properties has increased year over year, 31.4%. 31% increase in prices. And then for total dollar value of all residential non-waterfront sales has gone up, largest increase, 87.6%. These statistics are crazy, but I think the word is out that vacation properties, not only where it's at personally, but also for your pocketbook. So if you're thinking about short-term vacation rentals, or you're thinking about a vacation property for yourself, send us some more questions. You can find me at The Real Estate Rebel on Facebook. Join the group. Wherever you get your podcasts, make sure you subscribe and like. We want to hear more from you guys. And if you loved this, leave us a comment as well. I'm Scott McGillivray, and this has been The Real Estate Rebel. We'll talk to you soon.